Oh, sorry, go for it. Yep, we're ready.
Hi, welcome everyone. My name is Shelley Hawthorne-Smith, and we appreciate you all coming. I'm from the Office of Fellowships and Community Engagement in the Graduate College, and I'm really grateful that we have these two speakers today to talk about the NIH F31. So
you may not be grateful afterwards.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll let you know. Yeah, that's right. So we have Jamie Boehmer, who's the Associate Dean for Research and Graduate Studies in the College of Veterinary Medicine. And I'm going to let you give a little more of your background with the NIH, because she has really extensive experience in several funding agencies. So we really appreciate that. And Dr. Vedantam from Animal and Comparative Biomedical Sciences. And I'll let you give a little more of your background. But we appreciate you coming and look forward to hearing your advice.
All right, so this is going to be really informal today, as I kick my water bottle over already. We have some slides. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. We're going to go through, give you a little bit of background. But the reason that we're tag teaming this is because my background is as a federal program officer. I've actually been at the University of Arizona for 3 years. And prior to my appointment as the Associate Dean of the Vet School, I was in the Research Development Services. So I was helping faculty put together teams, apply to grants, predominantly NIH, because that is my area of expertise. I was an infectious disease researcher for the Food and Drug Administration for about 10 years before I went over to research development. And when I was in research development, I was actually in an intramural program with the Department of Veterans Affairs. And ironically, Dr. Vedantam was in my portfolio. So we go way back, even before I came to the University of Maryland, or sorry, the University of Arizona. I graduated from the University of Maryland. So anyway, so I have a lot of years in reviewing grants, putting together grants, and then it turns over to Dr. Vedantam to actually do the research, right? So I did this last year for the first time in my capacity in RDS, and Shelley had asked me to do it again, and so in the interim from that point of time, I transferred over to the vet school, and like I said, now I'm the Associate Dean for Research, so my role is just a little bit different, but hopefully today we can answer some questions that you have about fellowships and just give you a little bit of background from the perspective of a former program officer, and then I'm going to let you say a little bit about your role, because you have a very unique role in fellowships as well.
Okay, thank you, Jamie. So, yeah, so I'm here at the University of Arizona. I actually have a dual appointment. So I'm a professor in ACDS, which is the school with the unpronounceable name, and we're in Cal, so it's so long that it's hard to say. And my research here focuses on healthcare-associated infections. I'm a microbiologist by training, and the broad goal of our research program is to develop non-antibiotic therapies for infectious diseases. I'm also jointly appointed as a career scientist for the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, and I have a lab at the Tucson VA Hospital as part of that appointment. But the reason I'm here today is as a result of the research we do, I've had the real pleasure and honor to serve on a number of different federal study sections. And so I usually review grants for the Small Business Research Administration, the SBIRs and the STTRs, and also for the animal health component of the USDA. But for the last 3 years or so, I've served as reviewer and now currently as chair of the NIAID, so this is Allergy and Infectious Disease Fellowship panel. And so in this panel, we review grants that are F30s, 31, and 32, so the pre-doctoral diversity fellowships, and PhDs and postdoctoral fellowships as well. So I've learned a lot, and when Jamie invited me and I realized I could be part of this group, I was thrilled to bits, because I'm here only for one reason today, and that is I don't want any of us to reinvent a wheel that's already been invented. So if there's any little insights, hopefully, that both of us can share about the process, we'll be happy to do so. And I guess before we get started, I would just like to know a little bit about the audience here. So how many of you have submitted an F grant before? Perfect. that's great, which means we start with the best.
That's right.
Yes, nobody has to do something over again. And how many of you are intending to submit an F grant, let's say in the next year or so? So almost everybody. That's perfect. Okay, great. And I guess we want to keep this really interactive and informal. Yeah. So we have a bunch of slides as a guide, but I think it would help both of us if you just plunged in as well and asked questions, and it was more of a discussion.
Yeah, please take advantage of that. And we may, oh, here we go. Okay, so we're a little challenged today with this clicker, so I'm going to apologize in advance if this takes forever. So let's just talk a little bit about just some general stuff first. All right, as Gayatri just mentioned, there is a parent announcement for this F31 pre-doctoral. There's two. Okay, there's one that is the parent announcement, and then one to increase diversity in the biomedical workforce. Okay, so one of the things, oh, sorry, I was going to talk about institutes and centers, but let me just go over some basic eligibility first, because I think that's where a lot of people wind up having some questions. And now, am I okay? Shelly's back there messing with me. So let's talk about this, and then I think when we get into the institutes is when hopefully we'll have some questions, because there's a few things that you need to know there. So what are some basic things? Obviously, you have to have a baccalaureate degree, right? And you have to be enrolled in a PhD research program, or sorry, research degree program. You need to have some idea about what you want to do, and Gayatri is going to talk a lot more about this, which is really important, knowing what you want to do and knowing what your training needs are. And you also have to already have a sponsor or a mentor, okay? Someone that is going to help you through that whole process and be a part of it from the very beginning. Because crafting your application, it's really important to have your mentor engaged in that whole process right from the beginning. Obviously, NIH is looking for the best of the best, right? Because they want to reinfuse the biomedical workforce with those people that have the most promise to be independent researchers and to continue that trajectory in NIH and secure additional funding in the way of research project grants, or even maybe a K award in your early stage career. Okay, so they're looking for those people with the most potential. And I'm really having struggles here, Shelly. Sorry about this. There we go. This last bit is the one that I get a lot of questions about. You do need to be a US citizen to apply for an F31, or you have to have permanent residence here. Now, I'm going to tell you straight up that I'm not an expert in the different ways that you can be considered for these for these awards. So the best thing to do is to contact your business office if there's any issues at all about your citizenship, okay? And that's something that you're going to want to do right away if there's any questions at all. All right, and this is where I think we'll really start to get hopefully into some good discussion. So the first thing that you want to do before you even think about starting to put ink to paper is you need to make sure that you've identified a mentor that you're going to work with throughout the duration of your doctoral research, your pre-doctoral research, sorry. I've been going back and forth between postdocs and pre-docs for the past 2 weeks, so I'm sorry if I say postdoc, just ignore me, all right? So one of the things that I always recommend, whether or not you're a graduate student, a postdoc, or your faculty, is use NIH Reporter to know what is going on in your field, what is being funded by the institute that you are interested in directing your application towards. Make sure someone's not doing something identical that's already been funded. All right, it's also a good way to just kind of keep current with what's going on and what's being funded and who's doing what. Reporter is also a good way to find program officers, okay, that may be interested in your research and or that have fellowships in their portfolio, which we're going to talk about a little bit more. Make sure you know what is available to you on campus. So you guys can already check part of that box because you showed up today, all right? Workshops, other things that are available through your college or department. You have a writing group, maybe? No, yes, okay. Okay. But make sure that you know what's available to you, because I can guarantee you there are a lot more resources out there than you're even aware of, all right? So make sure if there's writing groups available to you, if any type of thing that your business office can help you with, okay, make sure you know what's available. This is really important too. Give yourself plenty of time. This isn't something you can throw together in 2 weeks. For the main reason that you have to get letters of support. You've got to coordinate with people to write letters for you. You need to spend a lot of time writing, revising, getting people to review your application. Okay, so don't wait till the last minute. At a minimum, do you agree, Gayatri, 3 months minimum? I say 6. You really want to invest a lot of time in this, okay? So don't wait till the last minute. And this last bit, again, goes back to my point about reporter, being able to find program officers that could be interested in your research. And we're going to talk a little bit more later about contacting a program officer. But having been a program officer, I can't tell you how valuable it is to have that connection to the researchers. Because sometimes people would reach out to me with research ideas, and it was something that I had just so much saturation in my portfolio. But there may have been an aspect about it that I was interested in, and I was able to redirect them and get a proposal that was really of interest to me and it was going to benefit the PI. Okay, so it's really important to talk to your program officers and to start those relationships early. Even as graduate students, it's not too early to do that.
Can I just
Yes,
add one thing
please.
here? So I think these are kind of the starting points for the information that we want to share with you. But there's 2 things here that a lot of this process is really about strategy. And you know this already because you're strategizing about your research project, your research aims, and you're talking with your mentor, or you should be quite frequently. The 2 things I think here which can really help you is NIH allows co-mentors on an application. So if you have a mentor, that person is going to be your sponsor. They're interchangeable words. And they're going to support you through the tenure of your graduate program. And that's wonderful. But maybe you want to do something that's slightly different from the immediate focus of the research in your lab, or you're developing a tool for your lab, and you can maybe draw on the expertise of somebody else in your department or in your unit. That person is most certainly able to be a co-mentor on your proposal, and it's going to look a lot stronger if you do that. The other, the way to find a co-mentor is actually your committee. So a lot of you already have committees assembled. Maybe some of you have had a committee meeting. So I always tell our graduate students, look at who's on your committee and maybe think of who you would like to invite to be on your committee, because that person or those people might be co-mentors for your F grant, and they bring strength to the process by doing that. Yeah.
Can we have co-mentors that are outside the University of Arizona?
Sure can, absolutely. So that depends on when you and your mentor decide that it's advantageous to have someone that will really benefit your research project, and it just so happens that person is someplace else. So, yep.
Absolutely. Can I say, I want to add one thing. One thing that's really important when you do have a mentor that's not on your campus is make sure you clearly define in your application how and how frequently you're going to communicate with that person.
That's right.
And if they're not, if they need to come on campus maybe once a year and otherwise you're going to be Zooming with them or something,
Correct.
That is something that they'll look at because they want to make sure that person really is going to make a meaningful contribution.
Right. Yeah. You don't have a co-mentor because it's a big name and they just won a Nobel Prize and they're going to look good on the application. That won't work. Yeah. Okay.
So I think we've covered a lot of this, but I'm just going to hit this again because these are really important parts. All right. I think we've talked a little bit about the mentor now, and the co-mentor mentorship team really comes down to what your needs are. Making sure that you talk to your business office, your department administrator. All right. Some of you, it depends upon what college you're in. It varies across this campus. If you're in the UAHS colleges, you have UAHS pre-award, and there are people there that are dedicated to the different colleges and departments. The same with CALS. If you're in Ag and Life Sciences, engineering is exactly the same as well. But College of Science might be a little bit different. Okay, that tends to go by department, what type of services are available to you. So it's very different with the colleges across the campus. So make sure that you identify whether or not you have a dedicated grant administrator to help you or whether it's your department business manager that does that. But that's a really important thing, is because they are going to be setting internal deadlines for you. Okay, there's the NIH deadline, and then there's the university deadline, and then there's your department deadline.
Yeah, and we'll talk about this later, but the reason we have this right up front and center is everybody needs to be aware of this, and many of us, including me, were not aware of it when I first started writing grants, which is when you submit a grant, you are not the applicant. You're the person that writes the grant and does all the work. The university, actually the Board of Regents, is the applicant on the grant. And so therefore, you're working not just according to your timeline, it's actually the university's timeline, because the entity is submitting the grant on your behalf. And that's the reason there's different timelines. NIH might say the grant is actually due only October 5th, but the university is going to say, well, we need the entire grant package on September 25th or 26th, because we need all this time to make sure that us, that's the university who's the applicant, has everything put together correctly. So you really should be talking to your grant administrator, wherever that person is or people are, to get that information that's university specific.
And that's critically important when we're talking about NIH, because NIH typically has standard cycles. And so you and the entire rest of the university are submitting for that deadline, right? So it's not like NSF, where they can have rolling deadlines for some of their directorates. Okay, so it's really important, because NIH, it can be 1,000 applications, right? You don't want to get lost in the shuffle, and if there's something you need to correct, you don't want to have to go to the bottom of the queue and wait and miss the deadline.
And if your poor mentor is submitting a grant at the same time as you are,
Yes.
it's good to start well in advance, because it's entirely possible that that will happen.
Yes. So other important things is make sure you identify who else on campus has received an F31 or may be writing an F31. You can find out who's already received one in NIH Reporter. You can literally just search University of Arizona, and it'll give you a printout of all of the grants that are funded that are currently active. You can sort those, and you can find the F31s and F32s. You can reach out to your peers and ask them for help. The very minimum, maybe if they're in your area of expertise, you want to ask them to review, or ask them what their experiences were with the whole entire process and their planning process, the review process. And last, don't forget all the information that NIH will push out to you. Okay, go to the website. You need to go not only to the NIH website that tells you all the information about F31s, but go to the website for the specific institute. Through Reporter, you can also access the strategic plans for every one of the NIH institutes and centers. And that will also tell you what they are most excited about funding. Okay. Which brings us to institutes and centers. So there's a running joke that if you know one NIH institute, you know one NIH institute, okay? I would almost say that that extends to program officers sometimes too, because they vary widely across the institutes and centers, all right, in terms of what they're willing to do, their timelines, things like that. But every single institute or center at NIH is unique. It has its own research priorities, its own mission, its own strategic plan, its own ways of doing things, okay? So the point in this is make sure that you identify which institute best aligns with the research that you're proposing, right? Because you're only applying to one. And just note too that for the parent funding opportunity announcement, or what we call FOIA, that the National Institute of Biomedical Engineering and, sorry, Biomedical Imaging and Bioengineering, I always get that one wrong, and the General Medical Sciences are the only two that don't participate in the parent. Okay, they only participate in the funding opportunity announcement for diversity, for F31s. But there are some centers that also participate. So this is why reading the funding opportunity announcement and knowing who participates and what they're looking for specifically is really important. Which brings me to one of the things that after you read the funding opportunity announcement, one of the first links that you should click on in there is the table of IC specific information, requirements, and staff contacts. Okay, so IC is just abbreviation for institute or center. because this provides really important information about what the scientific contact, the grant management contact for each institute that participates in that funding opportunity announcement. This is not specific to an F31. Okay, this is any NIH funding opportunity announcement. So get to know this link, and I'm going to show you where it is in the announcement in a moment. Make sure that you look, because this is where it could supersede their strategic plan or what's on their website. They may have specific information in this. You access the link and it'll take you to a table. They may say, we're only looking to fund dermatology research, or we're only looking to fund prostate cancer research under this. Okay, so you want to make sure that you check that link after you've read the opportunity. It also tells you any application-specific requirements for that particular institute and any specific mentor requirements, okay, or your sponsor. Sponsor and mentor are the same thing. I don't know why they call it sponsor in fellowships, and then you get to K's and they call it mentor. It's weird, but it's the same thing. It's your mentor. Okay. So anything that shows up in this table is going to be something that supersedes what you may read in the general funding opportunity announcement, and or that may be just on the general NIH website on F31s. Sorry, specific peer review policies too. Sorry, everything's specific about it. If there's anything that supersedes the general information, that's where it's going to be. So where do you find it? So in the very beginning of the funding opportunity announcement, under just the general description of the general purpose, okay, is where you're going to see that little link, right? And then what does it look like when you click on it? It literally takes you to a web page that has this big table, and each one of the institutes or centers that participate will have their own section. Okay. So I just happen to have chosen NIAID. All right, and so it tells you here, I think generally speaking, most F31s do not exceed 3 years, but it's, you know, but they tell you the specific program content, okay, and they also link you right there to their strategic plan, so what they're looking for. These could be more specific than this, but just make sure that you check this, that you're not planning some research that your institute may not want to fund under this.
Yeah. So I think that, to use an example, getting to know these individuals and developing a relationship with them is super important for where your application is going to be directed. So as an example, let's say your research involves, you know, a gastric cancer or an intestinal cancer. At the NIH, you have the National Cancer Institute, but you also have the National Institute of Digestive Diseases and Kidney Biology. So where does your grant go if it's focused on a kidney or an intestinal disease that happens to be related to a cancer? A program officer is someone that can actually help you navigate those decisions. Either these individuals who can direct you to a program officer, or a program officer itself, and Jamie will bring those up later. But having that strategy in place early on is critical for the success of your application. And this is the reason we had this right up front. It seems like a tremendous amount of work to go and read an entire F funding announcement, and it is a lot. And there are a lot of links and a lot of information, and it seems like it's just a waste of time because it has nothing to do with writing the grant. But I think it has everything to do with the successful strategy. So getting to know those individuals is important. And then, like Jamie said, critically important is these F grants are usually for a maximum of 3 years. But that could change, and it could actually decrease if any of our applicants here are already on a T grant. And some of your departments have specific NIH funding to support you as graduate students. And if you're paid off of one of those funds, then you cannot apply for the full 3 years. You may only be able to apply for 2 years, but your contact is going to tell you that. So it's really important to make those relationships from a strategic perspective, but also from a really practical perspective.
Any questions thus far on just some of the?
If we were to, you know, have that sort of concern about which institute our research would fall into and reach out to one of these scientific contact people, how much is like the right amount of information to give them, like not too much, not too little?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll give my answer, and then I'm sure you have a perspective too. So as a former program officer, what I really appreciated is, never a cold call, right? Because not because I don't want to talk to you, but because I want to be prepared when I talk to you. And I pick up the phone and it's, well, I want to do blah, blah, and I'm like, whoa, I just want to be able to see this and think about it. So I think sending an email with a couple bullet points to just outline it, and then maybe attaching just a one-pager. And it can be a specific games page. It can be just some bullet points about your research plan and your training plan, okay? Maybe a bullet point about your mentor, but just some information that can give them enough to decide, you know what, I need to transfer you to the NIDDK program officer. Or if maybe another one that I can think of is, the National Institute for Aging, and then National Institute for Neurological Diseases.
Mm-hmm.
So you never know, and they'll pass you off. But you don't want to send your full grant. I say no more than a page, and make it as bullet point, clear and easy, and then they'll hopefully reach back to you and say, I've got some time on these days, let's have a chat. And then you can take it into a little bit more depth. And sometimes they may ask you to send them more at that point. It's totally up to the program officer.
I totally agree. I think in that first initial contact, it's good not to send any attachments. So say what you want to say in the body of the email so that you don't have to make them click through and read through things. And just as Jamie said, summarize who you are, what you want to do, what your main research goals are, and what your thoughts or your concerns are that you would like information on. I've never had a program officer not respond. And almost in all cases, and sometimes I've contacted people and I've been wildly off on who I should have contacted, and I've always got a response back saying, it's not me you need to talk to, this is who you need to talk to. And one time I got a response back saying, you know what, Gayatri, you're not even in the right federal agency. You should be talking to somebody at the CDC, and here's who you should talk to. So it's been wonderful. And I think the hardest thing is to send that first email. So I actually composed something my very first time, and I ran it by a peer and I ran it by one of my mentors because I just didn't want to be off base. And people are always your mentors, other faculty, your students, co-workers are happy to help you. But simple and short, I think, for that first contact. And then your program officer is your best friend.
Yes.
They're the ones you call and you ask for a phone appointment, and you cry on the phone when things don't go the way you want, and they listen to you very patiently, and then you celebrate with them, and they're happy to do that. Yeah.
Maybe just a more general question. What is, in the end, the goal of the program office? So when I write an email to a program office, I want to be not saying, hey, I want to be directing you in the right direction. So I want to know what's the goal of it.
Yes. So I'm gonna just skip ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So
because it's and then I can. So here's hold that thought for 30 seconds, okay? Because I do think it's important to make a distinction between a scientific review officer and a program officer, and it's also really important the time frame in which you contact these people, because there's some time when it's good to contact one and not the other, okay? So a scientific review officer is literally the person that runs the study section. So they get all the applications into their study section, they look and they decide, who do I need, what expertise do I need to review these proposals? Now there are standing study sections, I think they call them curated now, right? that have regular members. But they also use what they call ad hoc members, because maybe you'll get an application into that study section and it belongs there, but they may need some additional expertise to review that. So a study section is generally a mix of standing members that serve for 3 years, and then ad hoc members. Okay, so that is the role of the scientific review officer. And why are they important to you? Because you may have some questions before you even submit about, not in the case of an F31, because they go to dedicated study sections. But just as an FYI, when does this become important later, is that you may be torn between two subject-specific study sections, right? And so reaching out to the scientific review officer is important if you want to know what is reviewed in this section. And is my application more appropriate for one versus the other. So you can contact the scientific review officer after you have actually submitted your application. You should not, however, contact your program officer after you've submitted your application, okay? Program officer is before and after review, not in the middle. Once it's actually been assigned and you've submitted, it's past the deadline, do not reach out to your program officer unless it's about something entirely different and unless it's about something that's for a future cycle, okay? Because that's a conflict at that point for them to talk to you, okay? So and they're the person that's gonna make the decisions in the end. They're gonna take the advice of the panel and they're gonna consider that. They're gonna talk to their program director and ultimately that goes up to council, and I think Gayatri is gonna talk a little bit more about that. But it's the program officer that has research in their portfolio, so to speak, which is really just a collection of proposals around certain interest areas, right? So program officer before for the preparation and after for review of comments, etc. But we're going to talk even a little bit more in depth. Oops, I messed up. Oh, I saved myself. Yay. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more, and now I'm going to answer your question in a little bit more depth. What is the initial contact? What is the point of that? So there's a couple different things. First of all, you want to make sure that the scope of what you're proposing is appropriate for an F31. And you had a good example, Shelley, of someone who proposed something outside of their dissertation research, right? And it wasn't made clear to the review panel that they were proposing something that was above and beyond, and it came off as a little flat, right? So make sure that you're very clear, and I'm not even gonna touch that because I want Gayatri to talk a little bit more about that. But the program officer is also going to tell you if there is a situation where maybe your research could fall between two different institutes. They're the ones that can help you make that decision. Where does it fit best? And whether or not it aligns with their specific portfolio. Okay, and some of that you can do a little digging before you even reach out to them because you can use Reporter for that. You can go into a tool in Reporter that's called Matchmaker, and you can put some keywords in there. Or you can dump an entire specific aims in there, or an abstract from a paper maybe, or a presentation. And you can search for similar projects, or you can search for similar program officers. And it will show you people, if you select program officers, that have research that hits those keywords or that is aligned with what is described in that abstract. And you can actually click on their name, and their whole portfolio will come up for you. Okay, so if you're someone who's interested in an F31, right, you might want to look for a program officer that has F31s in their portfolio versus someone that maybe only works with program project grants or cooperative agreements. They're probably not going to be the best person to reach out to because they probably don't have fellowships in their portfolio. So you're going to want to find someone. So you may have to click through a few names and look, but that's how you can find someone that chances are your research is going to be aligned. But that's what you want feedback on, right? You want feedback on, is this going to fit the scope of an F31? Does it align with what the institute wants to fund? And more importantly, does it align with what the program officer may be looking to have in their portfolio? Yeah.
Sorry, beyond the program officer, are there databases or other resources that we can use to identify what sorts of projects are most likely to be accepted by a particular institute?
So what I would do is I would use, and you may have a different answer, but I would use Reporter.
Yep.
And I would search for what that institute has funded and then just sort it and look and see what topics are there for their fellowships.
Yep.
I'm not really aware of any, other than looking on their webpage too and just kind of seeing generally what type of research, but you can actually see what they have funded.
Right.
If you just search by the institute. Yeah.
A question about the portfolios. You're saying that some program officers focus on like the fellowship specific types, others will focus on the subject being looked at. Is it more important to pick a program officer whose subject perfectly aligns with what you want, or their type of grant perfectly aligns, or are there enough that you'll find someone with both?
It should be both.
It should be
Okay.
both.
Yeah. Okay, and I think the last point here is that that should be and provide. It's really good editing here. Yeah, that was me. So at some point, when you get to the point that you've developed a relationship, you can reach out to them with your specific aims, and they could potentially provide you with some feedback. And they may say, hey, we like aim 1, but aim 2, not so sure about that. Aim 3 pulls it back. They might just give you some feedback there on how to improve that. And most important, and I think we've probably said this a lot today, is that it's really important to develop these relationships early. Because remember, the whole point of funding you under a fellowship is they want you in the system. They want to encourage you, and they want you to have a lifelong career with NIH. Okay, and this is where I'm gonna turn it over to you, Gayatri.
Sure.
So, well, we can just kind of go back and forth too, but this is just a general thing, just to kind of give you an idea of, woo, this is a big proposal, okay? And this doesn't even include all the other research attachments, right? This is just the bulk of it. And all those things in bold, you can be absolutely certain you are writing yourself, okay? The training in the responsible conduct of research is a one-pager. And the beauty of that is that we have those programs already established here. There is language on websites. There is a NIH compliant program through Research Discovery and Innovation. So you can pull the information that you need right from the website. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, okay? It's all right there. And you can even pick and choose because there's a lot of offerings. Chances are you will have something to do with your mentor statement as well because you're developing your training plan. And that's where a lot of that information is going to be. Your letters of support, depending, you may be writing those too, okay? So there are a lot of aspects to this proposal, and there are page limits. So that is the message here on this slide. And this is why we say it takes more than 2 weeks to write this proposal. You gotta really start early. And this is where I think, do you wanna comment a little bit about this? Because this comes both from preparation and a reviewer perspective.
Yes, and as someone who sees, I don't know, 180 grants every 4 months, this is actually a plea to everybody in this room. So if there's one thing that Jamie and I want you to leave our meeting with today, it's the recognition that you're applying or you're planning to apply for a training grant. The training is the incredibly important component of this. And part of that training aspect is to make a case to the NIH why this project that you're going to be trained on and why this experience that you're going to receive training on is going to be beneficial in the broadest sense to us as taxpayers. These are taxpayer dollars that's funding this research. We're making an argument that those are dollars well spent. For a training grant, as its name suggests, the important component is the training. And what you'll see as we go through the rest of the slides is the reason that the grants have so many components is that all of those feed into that overall training landscape. The research, which you're going to go into the lab and do, is only one component of that training. Your relationship with your sponsor, your development as an independent scientist, your relationship with the university in terms of how you translate that knowledge that you bring, your relationship with your co-sponsors and your collaborators are all part of the training. The science that you do is extraordinarily important for you to be done with your graduate program and to basically announce to the world that you're a scientist, but it's only one part of that. So I have some slides here that we put together just on the proposal itself, and then on all of the components that go together. And this is something that I just share with our graduate students, which is when you talk to a program officer or when you talk to anybody else about your work, you're going to realize something very quickly, which is going to be equally interesting but frustrating. These are individuals who have the unique ability to look at things from a bird's eye perspective. They're taking the 30,000-foot view. We are all, iPhone. No, are we using the phone line?
No. Can I plug this in and connect?
run it through the middle.
Thank you. I'm so sorry.
So, where was I? Proposal, yes. Yes, convincing. So they're taking the 30,000 foot view. Thank you, Jamie. So when you talk to these individuals, they're going to want you to cut to the chase directly. And we as scientists working in the laboratory are really, really worried about our day-to-day experiments, right? You know, this made a difference that I added 50 microliters of sodium phosphate instead of 25 microliters. And these are individuals we're now engaging with that are taking the broad view. I want to know how your research is going to be impactful to the world. In the same way, I want to know how your training is going to make you a better scientist. So your proposal really has to reflect that in terms of, and if you do this ad nauseum, if you do this repetitively, it's perfectly fine. What is this experience going to mean for your development as a scientist? Not your development as a microbiologist who's going to look at a petri dish for the rest of their lives, but as a scientist. And so your proposal has to have a structure, an argument, and to showcase and document everything that you can share with this group of people who are going to review it and then think about funding it from this bird's eye perspective. Does that kind of make sense? So it's really an exercise, and it was for me, both as an applicant and as a reviewer, of learning to take a giant step back and think about this one word that we don't think about very much in our daily lives, and that is impact. So I tell all the grad students in my lab, all of us in our lab actually, every single one of us in the group now, we do this exercise once every 2 or 3 months, where we have to make a 3-minute elevator pitch to the rest of the group on what we're working on. And when we realize we have only 3 minutes to talk about what we want to talk about, we think about impact. And so, and then for the more senior members of the group, we tell them they have a 90-second elevator pitch, and then I get a 15-second elevator pitch. And my 15-second elevator pitch is, do you like diarrhea? Do you want to have diarrhea? If you don't, come talk to me about my research. You talk about big impact. So yeah, can we? Okay, so that's a proposal. And so your research plan itself is going to keep that focus of impact in mind. And you're going to figure this out when you actually read the funding announcement. And they'll tell you what you need to have in the sections of the proposal. But that's all. All of those things need to be included. And remember that this research plan for an F grant is 6 pages. So you're making your argument from start to finish in 6 pages. You have to focus on the big picture and on the impact, and not so much on the details. At this stage of your career, if it turns out that you don't know how to set up a PCR, or you don't know how to turn a piece of equipment on in the lab, there's other issues. They're not worried about whether you know how to do those things or not. Okay. So, right. So then, as Jamie said, the entire application has not just these things, which is the research plan that we talked about, but all of those things. And actually there's more depending on other pieces of information you have to include. So getting yourself to the stage where you have enough time to think about every single aspect of this application is going to really help you. If you do a fantastic job on your research plan, you've written a Nobel Prize winning scientific argument, but you didn't tell people that you're actually able to have work in an environment where you're supported to do what you want. You don't have letters from that are really good and testament to what you're trying to do. Your application is going to fall flat. And nowhere do we see this. I promise you, nowhere do we see this more than in the F grants, in the 30s, 31s, and 32s. And I cannot tell you how many times there's a fantastic research proposal without any other support around it. And the panel always asks one question: how is this contributing to the overall training of this person? I don't see it, because their mentor doesn't seem to be very involved. The institution doesn't seem to be involved. The support letters are tepid, and I don't see how this is going to contribute to a good training experience. Now, the other side is true as well. If you have a really unfinished or not very good research plan, but you have a fantastic letter of support, that isn't going to go anywhere either. Yeah.
Question about the training. When we talk about the training, do you mean training that you would get anyway? Let's say that you're arguing to fund this. Is the training you get anyway with your mentor, or do you want to specifically try to show training beyond what would originally already happen?
That's a very good question.
Yeah. Do you mind just repeating the question for the people
Okay,
online?
so the
Yeah.
question is, what do you mean exactly by training? Is it training with your mentor or training above and beyond what you get in the lab? And I think that's a crucially important question. Training here is used in the broadest sense. It is, what are you getting from this experience that's helping you to develop as a better, independent, robust scientist? And so you could make an argument that this research project that you're working on is going to, one, from a research perspective, enable you to learn a lot of things that you wouldn't otherwise be able to learn without the support, like you get to use some of these funds to use a new piece of equipment or to broaden the research horizons in your lab. You also make the case that the training you get from your mentor and your collaborators and your consultants and everybody on the team is going to make you successful for a position. It doesn't matter what that position is. After you graduate, focused on this or that area. You actually should be talking about how you're going to use this experience to further your development in whatever area you want to go into. So, yeah.
Sorry, guys, one more.
Of course.
Where are we talking about the training again? Within the research plan or within your?
Everywhere.
Everywhere. Okay.
Everywhere. This is a training grant.
Okay.
You're going, and this is why I said that word impact is really important. So the impact is linked to the training. And basically what you're asking for in the very simplest sense, you're asking for a pot of money. NIH wants to know what you're going to do with that pot of money relevant to the mechanism that pot falls under. The mechanism in this case is a training grant. It's not an R grant or a research grant, which is what I might be applying to. It's not a P grant or a program grant, which is what a bunch of people might be applying to. It is a training grant. So as a taxpayer, I want to know that my taxpayer dollars are being well spent in the broadest sense to train this individual to go off and be successful at whatever it is that they want to do. So yes, you're integrally going to try to link your research with impact and training. And this is one of the reasons why we actually strongly encourage you to talk with faculty and or your peers that have been successful through this process. And you'll hear this theme come up. They weren't successful because they wrote the most fantastic specific aim2. They were successful because they made a case for that training. Yeah, sure.
Do you mind reading and responding to that bottom questionnaire? Preferable to describe future plans that are NIH research related keywords are in the training portion of the application.
Yeah, so for an F31, which is a pre-doctoral grant, maybe not so much. For a postdoctoral grant, definitely. For a pre-doctoral grant, definitely to talk about where you might want to go is fine, but not necessarily in terms of funding or other grants, other proposals. That's a good question.
The one comment that I would want to make about training is think about it very holistically too. It's not just I'm going to take a class and learn how to do statistics, right, to be able to analyze my data. It's what type of career development are you going to have, right? It's everything. It's your ability, attending meetings, right, getting exposure, networking, being able to write grants and manuscripts. So think about it beyond just skills at the bench, or it's you as a scientist. What is going to contribute to you being an independent scientist? If it's public speaking, that can be a component as well. It's everything about you, because your ability to communicate your results, to attract collaborators, that's all going to contribute to you being a successful researcher, right?
Your ability to advance the research that's currently being done in your lab, maybe by bringing something new to your group that didn't exist. Your ability to then think of your current mentor as your future collaborator, because you brought something to the lab that wasn't there before. All of these are part of the experience that will strengthen you as in your development as an independent scientist. Okay, so we can go on. Yeah, so then we don't have to read all of this, but we can go through it quickly. And so we have some helpful tips here, which is some of these we've already talked about. And I think the most important thing, again, is start working on both the science and the non-science aspects. And one thing that helps some individuals, maybe not all of us, but some of us is, I would strongly suggest you allocate time every day. If you're in the process of writing a proposal, keep some amount of time just aside and separate and as quiet time for your proposal, where you're really deeply thinking about all of these aspects. And a good example would be a very important part of this packet is your biosketch. And your biosketch is a 5-page document, which is like a CV, but it tells the NIH who you are, where you've come from, what you're currently doing, and what your broad goals are. And the biosketch at the NIH has a very unique section to it, and that is called the contributions to science. And NIH expects everybody, whether they're a pre-doctoral fellow or a seasoned faculty member, to be able to articulate what their contributions to science are. And although it seems daunting in the beginning, I think you could think of it as a wonderful opportunity, where you could basically say, look, in my undergrad, I had no idea what kind of research I was interested in. But then I took this lab, I talked to this professor, I had a small 3-month project. You've contributed to science more than you will probably ever know until you start writing that biosketch. And so it's a good opportunity to take the time to really develop that document, which will be there for a long time.
If you
Yeah.
plan on transitioning fields outside of the field that you're currently researching,
Sure.
and you're writing a biosketch or you're writing a research plan and including in there training and how will it, whether you're going to do training outside of the research you're currently doing,
Yeah.
how do you balance that in your biosketch and in your research proposal? Say, for instance, your future goals are outside of the bounds of what the current institute you're applying for because your research interests most closely align with theirs, but
Right.
your future interests may not.
Right. So the question is, how do you balance an issue where your current interests might be different from your future interests, and how do you actually utilize the biosketch and the research proposal to do that? This is one of the reasons why the research plan, that's 6 pages, it has a format, but it's not set in stone. And so I suggest that you can use words like rationale. Talk about what you want to do, absolutely in an open manner, but use the rationale section to basically articulate an argument for why you're here now, but you want to be there someplace else 5 years from now, and what you're doing to get to that. Nobody is going to hold it against you that you're actually going to have a sea change. Not a problem at all. But reading that rationale and then maybe working with your mentor to say that this student actually is thinking of doing something different, and here's how I'm supportive of this, is all built in. So you use the biosketch, you use the actual grant, and then you use the support letter to do that as well. It's not unusual at all. Not all of us started, in the same place as we are now, so that's fine. Right, so this is just kind of a summary of all of that. A panel wants to know why you want to do something and what the overarching impact is. So you have to be able to answer the question, why should I care? If you can't answer that question to yourself, nobody can answer the question. So then we'll go through this because we're running short of time. But I think, yeah, thank you, JB. So once you write this fantastic grant and put the whole fantastic package together and it's submitted on your behalf, your application will go off to someplace in the NIH, and that place is called the Center for Scientific Review, where that entity will collect all the thousands of applications that it receives every cycle, and there are usually 3 cycles a year, October, June, and October, February, and June for the most part. And then your application is sent off to the appropriate review entity or the review panel that reviews it. Does everybody know what a study section is? Yes, some people do, some people don't. So once your application is checked for correctness and completeness and all the formatting you're supposed to have, when NIH says they want 11-point font and 1/2 inch margins, please give them 11-point font and 1/2 inch margins, because the computer does the initial check and the reject, and you don't want to have all this work thrown out because it didn't recognize that you have a 1/2 inch margin.
And don't
So-
think that they don't check.
I don't think they
Because
don't check.
do.
Correct.
They do.
Absolutely.
And your application will be returned without review.
Absolutely.
And you will be bumped.
Yes, it's the most heartbreaking thing to happen. So then it goes to a scientific review group, also called a study section. And a study section is just a group of people that are experts in your field. They may not be working in your exact research area, but they have broad expertise in the field, and they're brought together to review your application. I've included both an embed as well as a link for a video that the NIH has released on how a study section works. It's really instructive. It helped me a lot the first time, because the most humbling part of this process, Jamie and I have waxed eloquent for almost an hour now, and I've said, you need to spend 3 months, maybe 6 months, and get all these things together. And it's public knowledge. I'm not sharing anything that shouldn't be shared. An application, when it comes up for discussion in a panel, gets no more than 9 to 11 minutes. That's it. So when your grant is being discussed, depending on the number of grants in the panel and depending on all of these other factors like how many people and you know what kind of volume they have, it's 11 minutes before a decision is made. This is one of the big reasons to hit those high points, hit impact, hit overall training potential, go for both breadth and depth, but go for the breadth as well. And so it's really interesting to watch that video. Do watch it.
And I'll make sure you have these slides.
Yeah.
So that you all have an opportunity.
Correct. And so the reviewers, and that's, yeah, we can just go past, otherwise it will start playing. We can just go forward. So the reviewers will look at your grant, and each grant is usually assigned to 3 to 4 people to review before the panel meets. So they get about 6 weeks to review your grant. And each reviewer will assign your grant a score on a scale of 1 to 9. Does everybody know that? Okay. With 1 being the best and 9 being the worst. And in general, your grant has to score approximately between a 4 and a 5 on average to make it to the table and be discussed at the meeting. So that's your goal, is to try to get discussed at the meeting. And then all of the, once the panel meets, they assign a final score, then that score is transmitted here to the second level of review by institute or center staff. And they're the ones that will actually make award decisions. So the review panel, the panelists, the actual reviewers do not make any funding decisions. So yes.
I'm just gonna click through this really quick.
Correct. And this is just a flow chart.
And the main thing to know is that fellowships don't go to advisory council.
Correct. They get a
that's
score.
That's the take home here.
Yes, they get a score. NIH announces what the score is, above which an application will not get funded, below which an application, below is always better, will get funded, and it pretty much follows that rule. Okay, so, and this is just the last plan. So when, this is something that happens inside the room when the panel is meeting. And this is on their website as well. This is what the reviewers are scoring an application on. Each of these sections gets a score, and then the score is averaged for a final score. Does that make sense? But look at the research training plan is only one of 6 criteria. And this is just the last slide we have to kind of say, this is the reason why all of these things are really important and not just the one aspect.
All right, so we'll just,
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Make
So-
sure you read the funding opportunity announcement.
Yeah.
Make sure you read the SF424, all the instructions, right? Talk to your peers, get people to review, know what resources are available to you, and plan.
Correct. If you are thinking of, I think the next submission is probably December. I think we're coming up on December or January, something like that, right? December 8th. So right now we're kind of in the second week of September. You're all in really good shape. If you want to kind of get going, this is perfect time to get started. And yeah, I'm available if you have general questions.
I am too. I
Yeah.
know I'm
So-
not in RDS anymore. I also want to point out in the back of the room, do you mind just standing up? This is Dr. Jessica Moon. Dr. Jessica Moon is with the Research Development Services. So if you have questions about fellowships as well, please feel free to contact Jessica, okay? If you have specific questions for me, that's fine as well. You can always reach out to me.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your attention. Sorry we cut it right to the end there. We always do.
We could do this for 3 hours.
We could.
Thanks again for coming, and thank you for presenting. And feel free to be in touch with questions.
Thanks.
When your grant comes back, do you get to know what your score was? You can-
Yes, you
If you're
do.
discussed.
Yeah.
Yep, it's all in what they call a summary statement. And all the reviewer comments will be there, as well as